The first sound they heard was not the slavers' ships screaming through the clouds. It was Daniel Reeves' voice, ragged and loud, daring them to come take his children if they believed themselves gods. Defiance cracked the quiet prairie like thunder, and for a heartbeat, the aliens hesitated, as though puzzled that a man with calloused hands and soil still clinging to his boots could speak to them like that. They had crossed dozens of worlds, burned forests, emptied villages, and yet here was a farmer at the edge of his cornfields, saying no. It was not courage they saw in him. It was something worse, something human. The sky was a pale bruise fading into night when the first vessel landed, claws of metal sinking into Daniel's field. He felt the earth tremble beneath his boots, felt the stalks of corn snap like bones under their weight. His son, Jonah, clutched his sleeve with small, trembling fingers, and his daughter Leah stepped in front of her brother, though her knees shook. 12 years old, already her mother's eyes and her father's jaw. Daniel wished he could tell her not to be afraid, but honesty bound his tongue. The slavers disembarked in gleaming armor, plates etched with symbols that were neither words nor art, just a reminder that their culture was built on ownership, on chains. They spoke in the fractured static of their machine voices, demanding tribute, demanding labor, demanding bodies. When Daniel did not answer quickly enough, one shoved him aside, its gauntlet hand hard as a hammer. He staggered but did not fall. The alien barked something, and the others laughed, a sound like saws tearing through steel. Jonah whimpered. Leah bared her teeth. Daniel raised his hands. Not weapons, not strong, not trained, but his hands were all he had. He swung at the nearest slaver, and though his knuckles cracked against their armored helm, he felt the sting of defiance bloom in his chest. The alien tilted its head as though amused. Then came the sound, crunch, snap, white fire in his arms, as another seized his wrists and wrenched. His hands broke like brittle sticks. The scream tore out of him, raw, unmanly, unholy. He collapsed into the dirt, cradling ruined fingers that bent in directions they were never meant to bend. Leah shrieked his name and tried to run to him, only to be thrown back, her cheeks slashed by a careless strike. Jonah's small body hit the ground beside her, a welt blooming purple across his ribs. The aliens laughed again, their metallic voices void of pity. They could have killed him. Should have. Instead, they left him writhing in the soil, hands twisted, dignity shattered, children whimpering against him. One leaned close, its breath a hiss of iron and ozone, and whispered through the translator, "You are nothing, human farmer. Next time we take them." And then they were gone, vanishing into the bruised sky as quickly as they had come, leaving only silence, broken corn, and the echo of laughter. Night fell heavy. The town was not far, but no one came to help. Daniel knew why. They had seen from their windows, their barns, their cowardly shadows. They whispered, already, he brought this on himself. They had always judged him, too proud, too quiet, too unwilling to kneel to gossip or tithe. Now, they would say the curse was plain. His children slept in fits beside him, their small bodies curled close as though proximity might protect them. Daniel lay awake, staring at the sky, his hands throbbing with each beat of his heart. Broken, useless. He thought of the plow he would never lift again, the harvest he would never gather, the embraces he could not give his children without agony. The shame was worse than the pain. And yet, as the prairie wind shifted, carrying the scent of pine from the forest's edge, something stirred in him. He remembered stories, whispers told around fires about what roamed beyond the fields. A beast left over from the wars of the last century. A weapon the slavers themselves had abandoned when it grew too wild, too unruly even for them. They called it the war bear. Daniel had laughed at those stories once. Not tonight. He rose, every step a blade in his bones, and told Leah and Jonah to stay hidden in the cellar until he returned. Leah clutched his sleeve, begging, "Papa, don't go." But he only kissed her brow with broken lips and whispered, "I will come back." Then he walked into the forest with nothing but pain for company. The trees swallowed him whole. Darkness pressed close, thick with the sound of branches snapping under unseen weight. His breath caught when he heard it. The low growl, deeper than thunder, vibrating through marrow and memory. The stories had not lied. The war bear emerged, towering, a mountain of fur and scars. Its eyes glowed amber, ancient fire smoldering inside. Its mouth opened, and the sound that escaped was not a roar, but a promise. I end things. Daniel did not run. He could not, even if he wished to. Instead, he raised his ruined hands and whispered hoarsely, "Help me." The bear stilled. For one terrifying moment, Daniel thought it would tear him apart. Instead, it leaned closer, breath hot and foul with old blood, and sniffed. Its eyes met his, and something passed between them. An understanding older than language, deeper than fear. When Daniel stumbled back toward the town, the beast followed. Not leashed, not commanded, but choosing. The slavers had not gone far. Their camp smoked beyond the hills, fires crackling as they counted their spoils and sharpened their cruelty for the next raid. They laughed around their machines, confident in their dominion. And then the war bear came. The earth quaked beneath its stride. Armor tore like parchment. Screams split the night as claws rend steel and flesh alike. Daniel, staggering, bleeding, guided the beast not with reins, but with the fury in his heart, each broken movement echoed by the monster's strike. The slavers fought back, plasma bolts searing through fur, blades scraping bone, but the bear's roar drowned them out. Daniel shouted through the pain, every word a curse and a prayer. Leah and Jonah, peering from the cellar door, saw fire light the sky red and heard the slavers cry for mercy in languages they had once thought divine. By dawn, silence. The camp was ash. The fields were ruin. Daniel stood on trembling legs, his children pressed against him, and behind him loomed the war bear, its fur dripping red, its eyes still burning. The town gathered that morning, drawn by smoke. They stared at Daniel not with gratitude, but with fear. A man with broken hands should not wield such power. A farmer should not walk with monsters. But Daniel said nothing to them. He turned to his children, brushing dirt from Jonah's hair, wiping Leah's tears with the back of his ruined knuckles. His body was broken. His spirit was not. And so the story began, not of a farmer who yielded, but of a father who returned from the dark with a beast at his side. Remember this, reader. The world may shatter your hands, may leave you crawling in dirt and shame, but dignity is not carried in bone. It burns deeper where no one can break it. Hold that fire. Rise again. The universe has yet to learn the full measure of a human who refuses to kneel. They told him to give up the bear. Daniel Reeve only laughed, a dry, broken laugh that made the townsfolk shiver, for it carried neither joy nor despair, but something sharper, a refusal carved in bone. He stood before them with splinted hands, his children at his side, and the monstrous shadow of Ashfong prowling the edge of the cornfields. The mayor begged, the preacher warned, the neighbors whispered of curses, but Daniel said nothing more. He only laughed, and that silence was heavier than any threat. Somewhere beyond the hills, the slavers were gathering again, and this time they would not come as raiders. They would come as an army. The prairie changed with the waiting. Crops withered, untended, as families packed wagons under cover of dusk. Chickens vanished from their coops. Dogs barked at nothing. Windows shut tight when Daniel walked by. Yet Leah and Jonah moved with a strange, fierce calm. Leah sharpened kitchen knives until their edges gleamed like silver. Jonah whispered secrets into Ashfang's fur. The boy's small voice steady despite the nightmares that made him wake, sweating, each dawn. Daniel saw them growing harder, too quickly, but what else could they become in a world that burned their innocence for fuel? The bear never strayed far. Some nights, it stood in the field as if guarding the horizon. Other nights, its roar rolled through the valley like an earthquake, and Daniel thought he heard in that sound the same thing that beat inside his own chest. Not yet defeated. It was Leah who spoke the truth aloud. "They'll come again," she said one night, staring at the stars as if she could see their ships already streaking across the void. "They won't forgive us for what you did." Daniel turned his broken hands toward the firelight. The splints clattered when he tried to make a fist. He met her eyes and said, "Then we'll remind them again." The reminder came soon. A shriek of engines split the morning sky. Shadows like jagged teeth crawled across the fields as ships descended in formation. These were not scavenger craft, but war machines, larger than houses, bristling with weapons that shimmered like molten glass. Metal walkers unfolded from their hulls, towering over the corn, each step shaking the soil. The town panicked. Doors slammed. Mothers herded children into cellars. The mayor, pale as chalk, shouted at Daniel to go to them, to offer the bear as tribute, to beg forgiveness before they all perished. Daniel did not move. Ashfong lifted its massive head, eyes burning like twin lanterns, and growled low enough to rattle teeth. Leah gripped a knife behind her back. Jonah held his slingshot, though his hands trembled. Daniel stood in front of them, back bent but unyielding, and whispered a prayer not for salvation but for the strength to endure the fire. The slavers marched forward, ranks of armor gleaming, banners of chains rippling in the smoke-stained air. Their commander emerged last, a tall creature, its carapace etched with scars, its voice carrying through a translator that rendered each word in thunderous contempt. "Surrender the beast. Give us your young. Do this, and we may let you keep the husk you call a body." The people of the town turned to Daniel, eyes wide, pleading, condemning. Even the preacher's faith faltered, his mouth working soundlessly. Daniel spat blood into the dirt. "You want the bear?" His voice rasped but carried across the field. "Come and take it." The first volley came like lightning. Scorch beams lanced the ground, splitting soil, igniting dry stalks. Fire swept the fields. The townsfolk fled, shrieking as Ashfong charged, its roar ripping the air apart. Plasma bolts seared into its hide, burning fur to cinder, yet the beast thundered forward, claws tearing through the nearest walker with a sound like steel screaming. Daniel clung to its back, broken hands straining against the beast's fur, every jolt sending agony through him. Still he rode, shouting orders not as commands, but as prayers, and somehow Ashfong obeyed. Together they ripped through the enemy's line, scattering soldiers who had never known fear until now. Leah darted through smoke, knife flashing, cutting straps, freeing neighbors who had been snared in nets of chain. Jonah hurled stones with his slingshot, each pitiful strike drawing attention, creating the heartbeat of distraction that meant survival. The commander watched with its many eyes, fury rippling across its armored face. It leapt into the fray, spear of humming plasma in hand, and struck. The blow caught Daniel across the ribs, throwing him from Ashfang's back into the dirt. His chest burned with fire, breath splintered, vision blackened. Above him, the commander raised its weapon for the killing strike. Time slowed. Daniel saw Leah scream, running toward him, knife high. He saw Jonah, small and stubborn, loading a stone into his slingshot, though tears streaked his face. He saw Ashfong lurch forward, wounded, for smoking, yet still unwilling to fall. And then Jonah fired. The stone whistled through smoke and struck the commander's helm with a soft, ridiculous ping. It did no damage. It was laughable, yet the alien flinched, eyes shifting for the fraction of a second. That was enough. Ashfong struck with all the weight of mountains, claws ripping through carapace, jaws crushing armor like kindling. The commander's body split in a spray of sparks and alien blood. Its army faltered. Its ships faltered. Fear, that most human of contagions, spread through their ranks. The slavers broke. Some fled to their ships, engines screaming. Others fell beneath claw and fire. By dusk, the field were littered with twisted wreckage, burning stalks, and silence broken only by the crackle of flame. Daniel lay in the ash, ribs shattered, hands useless but alive. Leah knelt beside him, knife still dripping. Jonah dropped his slingshot and wept into his father's shoulder. Ashfong collapsed nearby, sides heaving, eyes dimming but unbowed. The townsfolk crept from hiding, their faces pale, their mouths full of words they did not dare speak. They had begged Daniel to surrender. They had cursed him as cursed. And yet here he lay, not victorious, but unyielding. The preacher crossed himself and whispered, God have mercy. Daniel almost laughed. Mercy had nothing to do with it. This was survival, clawed and bloody. That night, the stars shone cold above the ruined fields. Daniel sat against the war bear's side, feeling its slow, steady breath, his children pressed close. He knew the slavers would not forget this humiliation. They would return, stronger, angrier. But for now, the silence was enough. And as he closed his eyes, he thought of the lesson written in fire and ash across the prairie. It is not victory that defines us, reader. It is the refusal to kneel, the audacity to stand with broken hands and still defy the boot upon the throat. Remember that. One act of stubborn love can unmake empires. They said the farmer would break before the bear did. Daniel Reeve only smiled through bloodied teeth, as though he had heard a poor joke, and whispered, "Try me." The slavers had returned with fire in their hearts and vengeance etched across their banners. But they did not understand what it meant to fight a man who had already lost everything but love. They had mistaken survival for weakness. They were about to learn the difference. The weeks after the second battle left the prairie a scar. Fields that once bent golden now lay black and ashen, soil cracked by scorch beams, fences splintered, homes gutted. Yet in the ruin, life stirred. Families who had fled returned to rebuild. Children played amid twisted wreckage, their laughter defiant against the memory of screams. Daniel walked among them with splinted hands bound close to his chest, his ribs healing crooked, but he did not walk alone. Leah, taller now in spirit if not in body, shadowed him with her knife at her hip. Jonah still carried his slingshot, though the leather was worn thin, and Ashfong limped behind, a hulking sentinel who refused to die. But the whispers grew. "He is marked," some muttered, watching the bear prowl at night. "The slavers will never stop until they take him." Others avoided his gaze altogether, ashamed of their earlier pleas for surrender. Daniel felt their judgment like stones pressing on his back, but he did not bow. He knew the truth. The war was not over. And he was right. At dusk one evening, the sky split open, not with raiders or walkers, but with something larger, a vessel the size of a mountain, its underbelly blotting out the stars. It descended in silence, light glimmering along its hull like a cathedral forged from steel. When it landed beyond the ridge, the ground shook for miles. This was no raiding party. This was retribution. Daniel gathered his children and walked to the crest of the hill. The vessel's gates opened, and from within stepped not soldiers but emissaries clad in robes of silver thread, their faces hidden beneath masks of bone. Their leader carried a staff crowned with a shard of crystal that pulsed like a beating heart. The emissary's voice boomed, magnified through hidden amplifiers. "Human, you have killed our soldiers, our commander, and dishonored our fleets. We come not to negotiate, but to end." The townsfolk cowered behind Daniel, but he stood at the front, broken hands dangling uselessly, Ashfong looming at his side. His voice, though cracked, cut through the stillness. "Then you'd better bring more than words." That night, the war began anew. The emissaries unleashed weapons not seen before. Machines shaped like serpents that slithered through fire, drones that screamed as they dove, chains that writhed like living things. The air itself seemed poisoned, heavy with smoke and static. The townsfolk tried to flee, but every path was sealed. This was not a raid. This was an extermination. Daniel led them anyway. He shouted for Leah to guide the children into the cellars, for Jonah to stay close, for every neighbor to arm themselves with whatever they could find. Shovels, axes, pitchforks. Humans had never needed symmetry or elegance in war. They needed only desperation. Ashfong met the first wave, teeth and claws painting the soil red. Plasma fire seared its hide, yet it fought on, each wound answered with fury. Daniel staggered behind it, shouting hoarsely, his hands burning as he tried to lift a stolen blade, his body trembling but refusing collapse. The emissary moved like a phantom through the chaos, staff blazing with light. Wherever it struck, men fell writhing, women screamed, walls crumbled. It was not simply a commander, but something more, something holy in the eyes of its people. To kill it would be to strike at their very pride. Daniel knew what had to be done. The climax came at the center of town, where the last houses still stood. Ashfong lay bleeding, its breath shallow, ribs heaving. Leah crouched beside the beast, her face streaked with ash and tears, refusing to leave it. Jonah fired his last stone, striking a drone from the sky, then looked to his father with fear and faith mingled. The emissary raised its staff high, a bolt of energy screaming downward. Daniel stepped in front of his children. The strike hit him full in the chest, flinging him backward into a wall that shattered around him. For a heartbeat, silence. Then the groan of a man who should have been dead, but was not. He rose. Slowly, agonizingly, Daniel Reeves stood. His chest burned, his hands useless, his ribs jagged, but his eyes were alight with something beyond flesh. He staggered forward, lifted the broken blade he had scavenged, and in a voice that shook the earth said, "You will not touch them." Ashfong surged up beside him. Every ounce of life it had left poured into one final charge. The bear struck the emissary, claws rending robe and mask, while Daniel drove the blade through its chest. Light burst outward, searing sky and soil alike. The emissary's scream was neither human nor alien, but something deeper, older, breaking the night itself. When it fell, its army faltered. Drones tumbled from the air. Chains slackened. The great vessel shuddered, as though mourning. One by one, the slavers fled, leaving the prairie littered with wreckage and silence. The battle's end was not triumph. Ashfong collapsed, its body broken beyond mending. Daniel fell beside it, clutching its fur, whispering words no one else could hear. Leah and Jonah knelt with him, their tears falling on beast and man alike. The townsfolk emerged slowly, faces pale, hearts pounding. They had seen a farmer strike down an emissary, seen a bear bleed for them, seen children stand in fire. No sermon could explain it, no rumor diminish it. For the first time, they bowed their heads not in fear, but in reverence. Days passed. The vessel was gone. The sky was clear. The fields, though ruined, began to show green shoots pushing through ash. Ashfang's body was buried on the hill overlooking the town, where its roar had once shaken the heavens. Daniel's hands would never heal. His chest would always ache, but when he walked the streets, people stepped aside not from fear, but from respect. Leah grew into her mother's strength, Jonah into his father's stubbornness. They carried knives, slingshots, and stories. Most of all, they carried the truth. Their father had stood when no one else would. Reader, remember this. Victory is never clean. Legends are written in scars, in broken bones, and empty chairs at the table. The world will tell you that power belongs to those with armies, fleets, banners. But power is not in fleets. It is in the father who rises from ruin, the child who throws a useless stone, the beast that chooses loyalty over freedom. Hold fast to this. Empires fall not when their armies are defeated, but when their certainty is broken by the defiance of those they thought small. And if ever you doubt, recall the farmer who lost his hands and returned with a war bear, and know, your defiance, too, can shake the stars.